Hello, welcome to this webinar in which we're going to be taking a look at selection in coding across Key Stage 2. What do we mean by selection? It's the way the curriculum defines it, but in everyday language we're probably more likely to talk about choosing or deciding, and we do it all the time. Computers need to know how to do it, and we need to tell them how to do it if they're going to do sort of interesting things. How do we make decisions as adults? Usually using criteria, we'll sort of like think, which is best? Or we might use a random or gut feeling sometimes, if both the possibilities are equally good or equally bad. Is there any prerequisite understanding to this? There is a bit, really. Children need to know something about cause and effect and how that can have an impact on the order of commands that we put into a program, and there's a webinar that we've just made on that, which there's a link to on the screen at the moment. So what kind of language do we use when we're choosing things in everyday life? I just want you to take a moment, pause the video if you want to, and just have a think. How would you explain to somebody whether you choose to take an umbrella with you when you go out? I wonder if you used a word like if, or a synonym of it like whether. And you might have used an else as well. I'd say something like, if it's raining outside, then I'll take an umbrella with me, or else, or otherwise, I'm not going to bother. You can get children to practice this kind of language by just making up sentences that start in if. So they could say something like, if there's puddles on the playground, then I'm going to go and jump in them. Or if it's a Saturday or Sunday morning, then I can lie in bed. Otherwise, I have to get up early. And so on, and just get them practicing that kind of language so they're comfortable with the concept of selection. We're going to take a look now at some examples into code. So one of the first examples which we see of selection happens at year 4, and it's this little program here called Is It Raining? Now in design mode, you can see that we've got some characters here and they've got an umbrella, and the umbrella I think starts off the program as hidden. So when we start running, that you won't see that umbrella. We need to select whether to show it. So we're going to ask somebody, is it raining or is it going to rain? And if they type in the answer yes, then we're going to show the umbrella. And that's quite simple, isn't it? There's one possibility that we're selecting from. And if they don't choose that possibility, then we're just going to do nothing and ignore it. So we run the program. Is it raining? I type in yes, and it shows the umbrella. Or if I type in anything else, if I type in no or 99 or anything, then it doesn't show the umbrella. So we've got that selection based on whether we said yes to is it raining. Then it gets a little bit more complex, and I want you to try, if you can, to ignore what's going on at the top of this. We're just interested in this bit at the bottom that starts with if. So what we've got here is we're on the moon, and there's a sheep here, and there's a rocket called Reginald, and we're going to click the rocket, and then the rocket zips across here. It's ready to launch off into space, but the sheep at the launch site, and it says type shoe. So if I type shoe and press enter, then the sheep does shoe. It runs off and comes back again. However, if I run it again, there's another possibility, there's another outcome here. Because if I click on Reginald Rocket and I type in something else, if I type in no or mo as I've typed, then Reginald and the sheep are both going to go up. So let's look at the code about how that happens. And it's all down here at this bottom bit. So if we type in shoe, then the sheep is going to move right. And then we've got this extra section here where it says else, which is like an otherwise. Reginald's going to go up and the sheep is going to go up, which is going to happen. So we've got this block here called an if-else block, which can help us to choose between two possible outcomes. And it's the if-else block up here in the yellow control section. After that, sorry, I wanted to show you there's a couple of there's another way of doing that. In this case, I'm going to ask somebody, are you hungry? And then if they say yes, then I'm going to say to them, eat a snack. I'm not going to use an else though now. I'm going to do another check, and I'm going to say if the input does not equal yes, then I'm going to say wait until the next meal. So just notice the difference here. I've got two if blocks to do that. In the next tab along, I've got the other way of doing it, where I say, are you hungry? And then if the input equals yes, then eat a snack. Or else, we're going to say wait until the next meal. So they behave in the same way, but one of them uses two ifs, and the other way is using an if-else. Let's just run it and check that it works as we expect. So I think I need to click run. So are you hungry? Let's say no and see what happens. It's worked. It's telling me to wait until the next meal. Very good. And now we're on the one with the if-else block in it. So are you hungry? Let's say yes this time. And that said eat a snack. So it's worked as expected. Now it's worth just thinking about this, because these two different ways of doing it, at the moment, they don't look significantly different. But when we get onto multiple options, so there's not just two possibilities that we're thinking about, we may be thinking about 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 possibilities. One of them's a lot easier for children to think about and build from. So let's carry on and have a look at this. Right, let's do some slides now, just to put a bit of context onto this. This is an activity that comes up in year 6, because in year 5, there's not really much else introduced in the way of ifs, elses and selection. In year 5, we do more about functions and organising your code and getting more variables involved and just having more going on generally. But in year 6, we end up with this activity here, and it's called Guess the Alien. It's lesson 5 in the coding unit in year 6. And the children have this challenge where they have to write a computer program that uses selection to play Guess Who with the player. Now, just to make it sort of simple, because we've not got much time here, I'm going to say that we're going to ask the player to choose a colour of an alien to start with. And you can see we've got 2 red, 2 blue and 2 green. Once you've chosen the colour of an alien, there are 2 possibilities. Plus, there's the possibility that the player types in something that doesn't make sense. So we've got 3 outcomes that we need to select between. So we've got the 3 different ways of doing this. We can either have no nesting at all and just use lots of ifs. We can have some nesting, or we can have lots of if-elses, which it gives us the full nesting. And they will look like this. In my experience of teaching this and talking to other teachers, what I find is that if we use the if-else way of doing it here on the left, there's a real risk that children will just put things in the wrong place, the commands, because, there's lots of possibilities to drop things in the wrong place here. It's quite convoluted. Whereas the version on the right here, which just has the 3 if statements, it's just more straightforward. Let's take a look at how we could build that one on the right. So let's imagine that we've chosen green. So we look at the greens, we say, all right, Doomlord's up here, and he's got 1 eye, and Woorah is down here, and Woorah's got 3 eyes. So we could just ask something like, does your alien have 3 eyes? As a question to separate them. Great, that's nice and easy. What next? We need to list the possible outcomes. So if we ask the player, how many eyes does your alien have? 3 eyes? And if they say yes, we're going to tell them back, you chose Woorah. If they say no, we're going to say, I've worked out you must have chosen Doomlord. And if they say something that doesn't make sense, we'll ask them to try again. Now in code, we're going to think about how that works with ifs. So it's if the player says yes, we're going to reply it's Woorah. Same sort of thing for Doomlord. If the player doesn't say yes, and we'll check that they've not said no either, we're going to reply either you've found a new one or your answer doesn't make sense, something like that. This last one kind of handles the unexpected answers that people might make. And when we put that into code, it looks like this. if the input equals yes, alert, you chose Wura. If it equals no, you chose Doomlord. If the input does not equal, I've messed this up. What this would need to say is if the input does not equal yes and the input does not equal no, then you could say you found a new alien, please tell us more, or your answer doesn't make sense, have another go, something like that. So what we do now is let's just take a look at how those work. So these are the live versions of that code. I've not got time to run them now. But just looking at them, you can see perhaps that this one here, if the children list the possibilities first, this one is going to be simpler for them to understand and generate the code for. This one, again, this is reasonably straightforward. A child might want a bit more challenge to have a look at something like this. If the input equals yes, then say you've got Wura. If the input equals no, then say you chose Doomlord, and the else at the end that catches anything else, just say that doesn't make sense, please have another go. That's reasonably straightforward, but it's a little bit trickier maybe than just having the 3 Fs. You'll know what works well for your children. This one though, where we've got an if-else with another if-else inside of it, tends to be harder to understand for children. So I just wanted to show you the other possible ways of doing it. If you were doing this activity, you could set it up and scaffold it something like this. So this would work. You could drag some of these around and put some things in the wrong place and just set the children this as a to-do and ask them to fix it. So if you broke something like this and had it that needed mending, you just go to the menu, you would say share. It might ask you to save it, and you just click on set as a to-do, and away you go. You can give that out to the children and ask them to fix it to get experience of this kind of if structures. I've got the tab here with the green aliens. You could equally have another kind of structure on here, the nesting with the if-elses. And children could choose for the third one, when they go to do the blue ones, which of these ways would they like to code when they add that extra tab to sort out the blue aliens for themselves. This at the moment doesn't look spectacularly different. However, at the end of year 6 there's an activity about text adventures, and text adventures has a lot of options in it. There are 5 rooms in this. So one way of selecting between those 5 rooms is to have this nesting like this with all these if-elses. And this could be confusing for children to look at. There's just so much inning and outing going on here that it can be quite hard to understand. Whereas if you use the repeated if approach, exactly the same job as this can be done like this. And this code I've got on the screen now is doing precisely the same job as that code there. And one of them is a lot easier to read for the children and would be a lot easier for them to build. I hope that you found this useful. You can ask children to do the straight ifs, which will probably be easier for them to build just by listing possibilities. But of course, you can give them the option of nesting and using if-elses to give them a little bit more challenge. And hopefully, by the time they're at the end of year 6 and they've had some experience of this, you can let them decide whether they want to nest if-elses or not to nest. And they can make their own choices about how they're coding and being creative. Thanks ever so much for watching. Hope you found it useful. Goodbye.